He's the man who forged a nation from warring states, who gave his name to China, and who left behind an army of over 8,000 terracotta warriors to guard him for eternity. His public works were legendary, from the first Great Wall to a massive national road system. He took a fractured, chaotic land and unified it, standardizing its writing, its currency, and its laws. He created the very blueprint for an empire that would last for millennia. The story of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, is one of legendary achievement. But this isn't that story. This is the story of what lay beneath the grandeur, because the legacy of the first emperor is built on a foundation of terror, a darkness so profound that history itself has tried to forget it. We know about the burned books and the buried scholars, but the emperor's darkest secret is far more personal and twisted. It's a secret that drove him to betray his own mother, build a tomb flowing with poison, and chase a phantom that would ultimately kill him. It's a secret that explains not just the man, but the terrifying nature of absolute power. So, what was the secret that history tried to bury? To find it, we first have to understand the man who built an empire, before we can understand the monster that haunted it. The visionary and the tyrant, before he was the first emperor, he was Yin Zheng, king of Qin. He took the throne when he was just 13, inheriting a state already shaped by generations of brutal warfare. For over 2 centuries, the land we now call China had been a bloody free-for-all between 7 rival kingdoms, a period known as the Warring States. This era of chaos was the forge that shaped Yin Zheng. He was a product of the philosophy that dominated Qin, legalism. It was a brutally pragmatic school of thought that taught that people are inherently selfish, and the only way to govern is through absolute authority and strict, unforgiving laws. There was no room for morality or debate. There was only the state, and the state's power was total. This idea became the bedrock of his rule. For the first few years, he was guided by his prime minister, Liu Buwei, a cunning merchant who had basically engineered Yin Zheng's father's rise to power. But as the king came of age, it became terrifyingly clear that he was not going to be anyone's puppet. He was a man of chilling focus and immense ambition. Starting in 230 BCE, he unleashed the full might of the Qin war machine on the other states. One by one, they fell. In less than a decade, he had done what no one before him ever had. He had conquered all under heaven. But he wasn't content to just be a king. The title king felt common, used by the very rulers he had just crushed. He needed something new, something that reflected his godlike achievement. So he created a new title, Huangdi, combining the words for august and supreme ruler. He would be Qin Shi Huang, the first August emperor, and he declared his dynasty would last for 10,000 generations. With this new title, he began to remake the world. He tore down the old feudal system, dividing the empire into 36 districts governed by officials loyal only to him. He standardized everything. The currencies of 6 different kingdoms were melted down and replaced with a single copper coin. Weights and measures were made uniform. He even standardized the width of cart axles, so that every wagon could travel on the massive new imperial road system he was building. Most importantly, he standardized the written word. The different scripts of the old states were replaced with the Qin small seal script, a move that would shape the cultural identity of China for thousands of years. In his mind, he wasn't just conquering. He was creating a single people, a single culture, under a single all-powerful ruler. From a distance, it's a stunning legacy. But to achieve this perfect, ordered state, Qin Shi Huang demanded a price. And that price was paid in blood, freedom, and memory itself. The visionary was also a tyrant, and the first clue to his darkest secret lies in what he chose to destroy. The trail of clues. Clue number 1, the war on thought. The Warring States period wasn't just a time of armies clashing. It was an explosion of ideas. It was the golden age of Chinese philosophy, where 100 schools of thought blossomed. Confucianists debated morality, Taoists sought harmony with the universe, and Mohists preached universal love. This vibrant marketplace of ideas was the world Qin Shi Huang had just conquered, and he saw it as a mortal threat. To a legalist mind, all these competing philosophies were just seeds of rebellion. They encouraged people to question authority and criticize the present by looking to the past. His brilliant and equally ruthless Chancellor Li Si put the emperor's fears into words. He argued that scholars who used the past to criticize the present were chipping away at the emperor's power. If the empire was going to be truly unified, it couldn't just be political. It had to be ideological. All thought had to be controlled by the state. So, in 213 BCE, the emperor issued one of the most infamous decrees in history. All the classic books from the 100 schools of thought were to be burned. All histories from the conquered states were to be destroyed. The only books spared were practical manuals on things like medicine, farming, and fortune-telling. Anyone caught discussing the forbidden texts would be publicly executed. Imagine it. Across the empire, officials confiscated precious bamboo scrolls containing generations of wisdom and poetry. They were piled high in town squares and set on fire. It was a systematic attempt to erase memory, to create an intellectual year zero where history began with him. But his war on thought didn't stop with books. It soon turned on the thinkers themselves. The next year, 212 BCE, came the act that would forever seal his reputation for cruelty. The traditional story, recorded by the Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, is chilling. The emperor, enraged after being tricked by alchemists who failed to find him an elixir of immortality, ordered an investigation of the scholars in the capital. Under pressure, they began pointing fingers at each other. The emperor decided their fate himself. He had more than 460 of them buried alive in a massive pit. Now, we have to look at this story with a critical eye. Sima Qian was writing a century later, during the Han Dynasty, which had every reason to paint the Qin regime as monstrous to legitimize its own power. Burying the scholars might have been a metaphor for execution, and the victims might have been the alchemists who tricked him, not Confucian scholars. There's no hard archaeological evidence of a mass burial, but whether they were literally buried alive or not, there's little doubt that a terrifying purge of intellectuals happened. The goal was clear: eliminate any and all opposition. It was an act of supreme arrogance, a belief that he could police the very thoughts of his people. This was the first major clue to the emperor's dark secret. It revealed a paranoia so absolute that he was willing to lobotomize his own culture. And that paranoia was about to get much more personal. The trail of clues. Clue number 2, the poison in the palace. The quest for absolute control is often born from absolute insecurity. While Qin Shi Huang was projecting an image of unshakable power, his personal life was a mess of betrayal and scandal that fueled a deep, corrosive paranoia. And the source of this poison was his own mother, Lady Zhao. Her backstory is its own drama. She was originally the concubine of the powerful merchant Lo Buwei, who gave her to the future emperor's father. Whispers followed her for her entire life, with some accounts claiming she was already pregnant with La Bui's child when she married the prince, which would make Qin Shi Huang illegitimate. True or not, the rumor itself shows the intrigue surrounding his birth. When her son Ying Zheng became king, Lady Zhao became the queen dowager, and her old flame La Buwei became prime minister. Ancient sources claim they rekindled their affair. But as the young king got older, Lo Buwei grew fearful. To get himself out of the dangerous affair, he decided to find the queen dowager a replacement. He found his man in a courtier named Lao Aya, who was, according to the historian Sima Qian, famous for his virility. To get him into the inner palace, which was forbidden to all men except eunuchs, La Buwei faked Lao Ai's castration. Lao Ai was admitted to the palace as a eunuch and quickly became the Queen Dowager's secret lover. This wasn't just a fling, it became a shadow government. The Queen Dowager showered Lao Ai with power and titles. In secret, they even had 2 sons. Lao Ai started building his own faction, dreaming that one of his sons might one day replace Ying Zheng on the throne. He even started calling himself the king's false father. It was a disaster waiting to happen. In 238 BCE, a plot was uncovered after a drunk Lao Ai was heard boasting about his plans. When the news reached Ying Zheng, his response was swift and unbelievably brutal. Lao Ai tried to start a coup, but it was quickly crushed. His punishment was designed to be a terrifying spectacle. He was torn apart by 5 horses. His entire family was exterminated. And those 2 secret sons, the emperor's own half-brothers? They were found and killed without mercy. His mother, the Queen Dowager, was stripped of her title and put under house arrest in a crumbling palace for the rest of her life. As for La Bouée, the man who started it all, he was implicated in the scandal and, fearing the king's wrath, drank poison and killed himself. This event was a defining trauma for Qin Shi Huang. It was a betrayal by the 2 people who should have been his closest allies. Historians believe this left him with a pathological distrust of everyone around him. It's probably no coincidence that he's the only emperor in Chinese history who never named an empress. The poison in the palace had infected his mind, and he started seeing conspiracies everywhere. This paranoia, colliding with the one enemy no emperor could conquer, would lead to the final and most bizarre clue to his darkest secret. Hashtag the trail of clues. Clue number 3, the macabre obsession. For a man who had conquered every kingdom and controlled every aspect of his empire, one opponent remained, his own death. Qin Shi Huang, the ruler of all under heaven, was terrified of dying. His quest for immortality became the single driving obsession of his later years. This fear made him a ghost in his own palaces. He built elevated walkways and walled roads between his residences, so he would never have to walk outside exposed. His location was a state secret. Anyone who revealed where the emperor was sleeping was immediately executed. He believed that by hiding from men, he could also hide from the evil spirits that wanted to kill him. His search for eternal life became a massive state-sponsored project. He sent expeditions searching for the legendary elixir of life. The most famous was led by an alchemist named Su Fu, who sailed east with a fleet of ships and thousands of young men and women, tasked with finding a mystical island of immortals. Su Fu never returned. Legend says he colonized part of Japan, figuring that was a safer bet than returning empty-handed to face the emperor's anger. Back home, the emperor put his trust in alchemists who promised they could brew potions of longevity. Tragically, a key ingredient in many of these supposed elixirs was mercury. In ancient China, the strange liquid metal was believed to hold the secret to eternal life. So, Qin Shi Huang began taking mercury pills, believing they were his immortal medicine. The very substance he thought would make him immortal was actually a slow poison. It's highly likely that his increasingly erratic behavior, his violent temper, and his escalating paranoia were all symptoms of chronic mercury poisoning. His quest to live forever was actively killing him. As his health failed, his obsession with the afterlife grew even stronger. If he couldn't live forever in this world, he would build a new one to rule in the next. He had started work on his tomb long before he had even unified China. For 38 years, a workforce of over 700,000 laborers toiled to build a mausoleum the size of a city. This wasn't just a tomb. It was a parallel universe for his eternal reign. The centerpiece is the famous Terracotta Army. Over 8,000 life-sized clay soldiers, each with a unique face, were arranged in battle formation to serve as his guard in the afterlife. But the soldiers were just the beginning. According to Sima Kayan, the central tomb chamber, which is still unexcavated, is a macabre wonder. It's said to contain replicas of his palaces. The ceiling is a map of the heavens, with pearls representing the stars. And on the floor is a model of his empire, with the great rivers of China recreated in channels of flowing liquid mercury. Modern soil tests around the tomb have in fact found abnormally high concentrations of mercury, suggesting this part of the legend might be true. To keep the secrets of his tomb safe, ancient sources claim that many of the craftsmen who built it were killed and buried at the site. Concubines who had not borne the emperor, any children were ordered to be buried with him. The gates to the inner tomb were supposedly sealed, trapping the last of the workers inside, ensuring no one who knew its secrets would ever escape. This brings us to the edge of his darkest secret. We've seen the clues: a war on memory, a soul scarred by betrayal, and a pathological fear of death. They all point to one terrifying conclusion: the revelation, the ultimate secret. So what was the darkest secret of Emperor Qin's reign? It wasn't a single act. It wasn't the burned books, the dead scholars, or the poisoned tomb. Those were just the symptoms. When you put all the clues together, a terrifying picture emerges. The ultimate secret, the truth that connects every brutal act and paranoid decision, was the nature of his own mind. His darkest secret was a conviction, born of arrogance and fear, that he could and should become a god. He believed he could conquer not just the warring states, but reality itself. He thought he could control what people thought by burning their history. He thought he could secure his legacy by murdering his own family members. And most chillingly, he believed he could defeat death, either by finding an elixir or by building an entire, eternal universe for himself to rule from beyond the grave. This wasn't just a thirst for power. It was a megalomaniacal quest to impose his will on the fundamental laws of existence. The tomb is the ultimate proof. It's not a monument to his life. It's an engine for his eternity. The flowing mercury wasn't just symbolic. It was meant to be the literal, ever-flowing lifeblood of his new subterranean world. This belief that he could transcend being human through sheer force of will is what reframes his entire reign. His tyranny wasn't just political, it was metaphysical. The book burnings weren't just to silence dissent. They were to silence any story that challenged his own divine importance. His paranoia wasn't just a fear of assassins. It was the fear of anything an idea, a person, or nature itself that reminded him he was mortal. The ultimate horror of this secret is how it consumed him and his empire. In his desperate search for eternal life, he drank the very poison that killed him at the age of 49. In his obsession to create a dynasty that would last 10,000 generations, he built a system so brutal and paranoid that it collapsed just 4 years after his death, when the culture of fear he perfected turned inward and devoured his own family. The first emperor of China tried to wage a war against reality, and the collateral damage was his country's history, his family's lives, and his own sanity. His tomb, still sealed after more than 2 millennia, is the final monument to this secret. We're hesitant to open it, not just because of rumored booby traps and confirmed toxic mercury vapors, but because of what it represents: the terrifying ambition of a man who believed he could build his own eternity and was willing to sacrifice anyone to do it. So how should we remember Qin Shi Huang? He was both a nation builder and a culture destroyer, a unifier and a tyrant, a visionary and a madman. He gave China its name and its imperial foundation, which would endure for 2,000 years. Yet the cost was a reign of terror so absolute, it became a cautionary tale for all who followed. His secret quest to conquer mortality serves as a timeless warning about absolute power. It shows that the desire for control, when unchecked, doesn't stop at borders or armies. It seeks to conquer thought and ultimately death itself. Qin Shi Huang's story shows us that this path doesn't lead to godhood, but to madness. Perhaps the greatest irony is that in his desperate attempt to be remembered as an immortal god, he ensured he would be remembered as a deeply, tragically, and terrifyingly human emperor. What do you think is the most shocking part of his story? Should his tomb ever be opened? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to uncover more secrets from the ancient world, make sure to like this video and subscribe.